Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in today's episode, we're discussing chapters 44 and 45. We're so close to the end.
So close, guys.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Talk about climactic chapters. It felt like that last chapter was about as intense as it could get, but if you're like following along with like the emotional arc here, this one is so intense.
Seeing as the last sentence of the previous chapter is, "I love you," I said, and stabbed him. We expect there to be a bit of a...
Yeah, and if anybody, I kind of would like to know, like, if you were a person who was able to actually just, like, read the end of chapter 43 and then, like, go to bed and, like, leave your book for the next day, you're a stronger human than I am. And I'd love to hear from you. Like, send me a note. Like, we'll give you a free coaching session or something because, goodness, you have to read. You have to read on. Okay, so thank goodness she was right.
She was right. She trusted herself that she had heard correctly. She made the right decision. He survived.
Yep. And so
Broke the curse.
the tip was nicked. It was turned inward. Like, his heart was actually made of stone. And we start to learn that this was a thing that had happened to part of how she managed this thing to, like, capture their magic. So, okay, so the whole thing was a trick. So she couldn't kill him. She didn't kill him. She's alive, and now she's hoping that what Rhysand was hoping is going to happen now, where, like, jump up and kill her, but he doesn't. The mask doesn't fall off. He's still bleeding. He's not healing, and everybody's like, "Okay, she won. Like, free them." And no, the thing that we were afraid of before, the thing that we worried about, really happened. I didn't specify when I had to free them. At some point, perhaps when you're dead.
And now I'm going to kill you slowly and painfully. Very, very painfully.
Yep. So I'm going to make you pay for this. And then she starts shattering her bones.
Don't like it.
And she says here, she's like, okay, now this is one of those moments, like, if we want to take a minute and, like, really explore what we think about ourselves, she's like, admit you don't really love him and I'll spare you. Like, all she has to say is, like, I don't love him. And she's like, I wouldn't say that even if she splattered me across the ground. Okay. So, like, this is an interesting thing that, like, this to her feels so important that, like, she wouldn't say it, like, that this actually feels like a thing worth doing. And I'm like, would that even be a thing that was that important? Now, it does, draw me back to the book Jesus Freaks. I don't know if you ever read that.
I didn't, but I remember the whole...
Yeah, but there were a number of stories of, like, early Christians, like, within, the Roman Empire, where it was like, denounce your faith or be killed, and, like, they wouldn't.
Right.
It was like, no, like,
this is where Feyre is. She is a zealot.
She's
in
not
the Church of Tamlin.
Right? Oh my goodness. So it's like I know that there are, that people have made that choice. It also reminds me of we were talking about this with our family the other night, the movie, The Recruit. I don't know if you ever saw it. I'm going to get the details wrong, but it's basically somebody who gets recruited to be in, like, some branch of the government that's, like, covert, agent kind of things. And so they have to go through this different training. And at one point, like, it's actually, if anybody's not seen the movie and you're going to see it, just pause for a minute. Don't listen. This is a total spoiler.
La 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 la.
But it's actually fake. Like, they think that they're captured by the enemy. It actually turns out to be a training exercise. And
tricky.
It is tricky. And, like, all of their torture and what happens is actually being filmed as, like, part of class dynamics. But the point is to see basically how long it takes for each person to break.
Ugh.
And the lesson that they're trying to teach them is everyone breaks.
Everyone has their point.
Right. And I think there's a, for somebody in that position, there was a, because I think it's easy to, when you're not in the moment, to be like, I'm the person that won't break.
Of course.
And to think of ourselves that way.
I'm not that statistic. I'm the 1 in 5 quadrillion that.
And our main character in the story, now he lasts the longest, right? And that was the thing, like, and we're able to see that he's strong. But the point is, do not get captured because everyone breaks eventually. Like, and there's a point with sleep deprivation and pain, and I'm like, this isn't a character issue. Like you're a human, and like the mind breaks at a certain point. Yeah. Anyway, but like that, like everyone breaks. It always stood out to me, and I'm like, everybody's got their point in real life.
That just sucks.
That does just kind of suck. It kind of does, but. Yeah, but she's in this space right now of like, nope, like I'm not gonna, like, this is the hill I'm gonna die on. I'm not sure if I think this is a good call, but it makes for a good book. Yeah, but she's like, even if she splattered me across the ground, I'm not going to do this. So Rhysand is roaring like Feyre, and Amarantha kind of just loses her shit here. You think you're worthy of him? You think you deserve anything at all? We hear Rhysand yelling her name again. And I love that she knows, like, yelling it as though he cared. I blacked out. She brought me back, made sure I felt everything. Continuing to breaking bones. And she is just names. You filthy pigs. You traitorous piece of filth. And we do see Rhysand here. Like, he tries to jump in. He actually does try to help. He snatches up her bloody knife and launches himself at Amarantha, aiming the ash dagger at her throat. Lifts a hand, she doesn't even bother to look, and he's blasted back. So he doesn't succeed, but this was another moment where, like, we started to see that moment in the cell that, like, he does not like her, no matter what he presented before. Like, he fights back here at the end. Oh my gosh. Oh... So she is getting broken bit by bit, and being yelled at to...
I had marked this thinking like, oh, look, she's finally begging Amarantha, like, stop. And she strains to reach a hand toward her feet, please. And I'm just now realizing that's when Amarantha was torturing Rhysand, actually. So she still never begs for her own life, but here she is just begging her to stop. Because the red marble has already splintered where Rhysand hit it after Amarantha.
Yeah. Yeah, because she has this moment where, and after this, the bond goes, this bond between them, and she starts flashing between her body and his, seeing herself through his eyes. But even that, she knows it's not for her. She's like, stop, don't pretend you care. But she does. And Rhysand's still yelling for her. And this is an interesting moment here. I think there's a lot of depth in this, where as she's on the verge of dying here, that this idea of like your life flashes before your eyes, and she's going back and she's her memories. But it's interesting that it's like it's a compilation of the worst moments. She's a storybook of despair and darkness, all the way back to that young rabbit bleeding out in that forest clearing, my knife through her throat. My first kill, the first life I'd taken. And it's so interesting that like the depth of her pain started with this first kill of a rabbit and ending with this last kill of these fairies, and all the time in between feeling like despair and darkness. But this idea here where she says, she fed her family. That's what she needed to do. But then she crept back into the woods and wept for hours, knowing a line had been crossed, my soul stained. I had to sit with that one for a minute, because I grew up on a farm and we hunted. We're a family that eats meat. And I know that there are a lot of people who are vegan because they think that the idea of ending an animal life is awful, where I feel like the perspective that our family has always taken is one that is much more similar to that of Native Americans, where we don't have a disrespect for life. It's not like, oh my gosh, let's go kill an animal because that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Like, I have a high respect for animal life, but also do think that they are intended to be eaten for food. When I study, like, when I look at the human digestive system and all of the facts and all of the information that I can bring about, and I know that there's a ton of debate in there, and like, friends, I love you. Don't even think about sending me an email about why I ought to be vegan. Not open. Not open to that at all. In as many words as I need to
Got our
say.
boundaries.
These are boundaries.
Boundaries.
It will be deleted. It's not a discussion I'm willing to have. But like, the interesting thing here of her having this belief that that her soul was tainted at this point. Now, I wouldn't have that over killing an animal, but I'm like, I do think we sometimes have those moments when we're young. Like, I think I can think back on my life. I'm like, yeah, I can look at different things, moments of such deep shame, and I'm looking back to different things, and I'm like, yeah, like, I go way back. I'm like, I can find the moments where I'm like, that moment that was so shameful for me, that felt like a line had been crossed. And like, okay, that was the point at which I became a bad person. Like, I became irredeemable at that moment. I don't know if our audience can relate to that, or if anybody can relate to that, but I've had those moments. And it wasn't hunting in the woods with my dad, which I also did. It wasn't fishing or anything like that. Yeah. It was much more deeply shameful moments, typically, around, some of those non-consensual sexual experiences. And even though they weren't my fault, like, in my mind, because of purity culture within the church,
Yeah.
I was officially, like, tainted.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. It's like, I am now unclean and irredeemable and forever dirty and broken. And it's like, it felt like a line had been crossed.
Yeah. I can relate.
Unfortunately, I think so many people can. But but we saw, like, how, like, we're over here, being like, man, even from the beginning, it's like, okay, she's so strong that she's able to hunt and, like, do these things. And from the outside, really seeing, whenever her dad wasn't able to provide and her sisters weren't able to provide, and, like, recognizing she was in a terrible, hard situation, and she stepped up. And we've got so much, I think I did, like, so much respect for this character and her grit and her determination. And she had her blind spots, but that overall, she's a person who I admired even from the get-go, right? Now, I mean, again, she's got her moments, but to realize that in the depths of her soul, from that very first moment, that, like, she's believed that her soul's been tainted this entire time. Like, she believed she crossed a line at that point that was, she could not come back from. And you start to see how that has affected every choice up to this point.
Yeah.
And that just resonates with my story so much. And, like, we look back at the negative self-talk. We look at the struggles. We look at her inability to see the good in herself, her inability to value her dreams and her desires. And it's like, yeah, that's what happens when you believe that you're irredeemable.
Yeah.
And we're here in the present being like, gosh, why am I struggling with, like, finding, like, a solid vision for my future? Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's like, because we've believed for the last 30 years that we're irredeemable because of some line that we believe took our innocence away.
Yeah. People with a stained soul don't deserve to have a beautiful future. Or maybe other people with stained souls. They definitely deserve to have a beautiful future, but my particular brand of stain on my particular soul does not deserve a beautiful future.
That's always how shame works. Right?
Yeah.
Shame. So, oh my gosh, so she has this deep moment, and, like, where we get to see that, like, she's been broken and hurting for a very long time. Okay, and then back to Amarantha's intense shriek, say that you don't love him, she shrieks. And the blood on my hands became the blood of that rabbit, became the blood of what I had lost, but I wouldn't say it.
Because loving Tamlin was the only thing I had left, the only thing I couldn't sacrifice.
Mm.
Just like her word to her mom was the only thing she had left at the beginning of the story, and now it's her love for, she doesn't have that anymore, but now she has this love for Tamlin, which is the only thing she has left, and it's what this woman torturing her, breaking every single bone, is saying, give up that one thing.
Yeah. Another call to not wrap your entire life and identity up in one thing.
Yeah.
Just on a step outside the moment kind of note. Oh my gosh, but okay, but this is so intense. Tamlin tries to stop it, so he still can't. She still has his power. He still can't get up because he just got stabbed in the chest. He even tries finally saying sorry, which apparently he has not done for the last however many years. They've been captured for 50, and like the insult happened way before that. Oh my goodness. And so she's still shouting at her to say that you don't love him.
And I wonder if she really would have stopped there.
Probably not.
Because now that we've read, have we read to the end of the chapter? We know.
No, we're almost.
No, all right. Damn it. Wait, but this is a 2-chapter episode, so everyone has read chapter 45, right? Right? So I can say, like, would she have stopped? Because if you know where this is going, and you don't know where it's going after that, I'm trying to speak without saying spoilers, makes me dizzy sometimes.
Right.
But like, it might seem like that was one more sacrifice. Like, that's the sacrifice she should have made.
Mm.
Because now she's already killed the 2 fairies and stabbed Tamlin in the heart. But if she would just say that one thing, what if that's the ash to the ash dagger to the heart of this? Make that sacrifice. Just say you don't love him, and then you won't die.
Right. Yeah, it's like, would she have actually changed it? But that's interesting. Like, that was a kind of a point that I had thought about. So I was thinking about sacrifice and thinking about these last few chapters, and things that we're willing to give up. It's interesting where my lines are right now, where when I think about like what I would be willing to sacrifice for my kids, like if somebody was presenting me with like my kid's life versus my life, like would I sacrifice my life for theirs? 1,000%.
Easy choice there.
Painful, awful, horrible death. Yeah. Like honestly, when it comes to this sounds awful, but the idea of like doing well under torture, I'm like, I lived in the most horrendous pain for such like a really long time. I'm actually pretty good at it. Like of all the people who would do well under torture, like I think I'm gonna be fine. Like it's gonna suck, but like I've been through.
Yeah, I would be. You're not gonna be tortured.
No,
like,
let's hope not.
I'm gonna be fine when I get tortured.
I would be fine. But if somebody's like, how are you gonna, just like, I'm gonna be fine. Like I mean, my doctors continually were like knowing how painful certain treatments are, and they're like, how are you so quiet? But your understanding of pain changes whenever you're in such high levels of it. Like my pain tolerance was so high, and part of it being because like my body would just shut down, part of it going into a freeze response, not all healthy, but like I just had a ridiculously high pain tolerance. So like when I'm talking about like what I would sacrifice for my kids, it's really high. Like we even talked about, one episode of like even certain things of if I have, values around like, yeah, for the most part, I believe in nonviolent solutions, but am I going to just throw that to the wind, like to save them? Yeah. And I will deal with the consequences afterward. Like I would just give up so much. And yet at the same time, right now, one of those lines for myself, and I've mentioned this on the podcast multiple times already, is like, I am not willing to make myself less than to make somebody else comfortable. I'm not willing to show up in a setting, or I'm becoming the person is probably more accurate. I say it in the present tense, helping myself to believe it, but I'm becoming the person who is not willing to shine my light less brightly just to make you less comfortable. And there's on the surface, right? There's like a disconnect there. It's like, wait, you would like endure torture for this, but you're not willing to just like show up a little bit differently right here. And yet that makes perfect sense to me right now. Yeah. And like, so I think on the one hand, well, yeah, I'm like, we have to ask ourselves about like the torture situation and would we really hold to it in those cases? There's been a few situations right now where I'm like, I could make this better and easier and smoother if I was just willing to keep the peace. If I was willing, and like in certain relationships, like with my kids, if I was willing to say, just let it go. You feel a little uncomfortable right now with this person? Like, let's just pretend that we don't. Like, it's fine. It's just who they are. Like, just shut down that intuition. And we could all make the situation so much easier if we just like, oh, when this person says like a racist comment that makes you uncomfortable, just don't say anything. It's no big deal. We could do that. And everything would go so much smoother. And yet I like right now, I'm like, I'm not willing to. And yet I would probably endure torture for that exact same person to not have to endure torture. The exact same person who I'm not willing to sit in a room with you and be quiet while you speak ill of other humans. Like, I'm not willing to sit by while you say comments that are racist or homophobic or ableist. Like, I will not sit by and say nothing, not for the sake of keeping the peace, not for the sake of making you comfortable, not for the sake of maintaining the relationship. And yet at the same time, if somebody said, we're going to torture and kill this person or torture and kill you, I'm going to offer myself up.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense to me in this moment.
Yeah. Such a bundle.
And so like when she says, when it's like she's willing to endure torture, but she's not willing to let go of this line. The thing about like boundaries and where they are for ourselves, like they are a deeply personal and spiritual practice. And I don't think they need to be explained or justified or make sense to anybody else. We just have to know where they are. And like, we have to hold the line. Like, it's the only way we can live in integrity with ourselves, even if nobody else gets it. So like on the surface, like I find myself a little bit like, really, Farah? And also at the same time, I'm like, oh, I get that. Like right now in my life, like, and this is a passage that the first time that I read this didn't stand out to me. This didn't connect with me the way that it does today. When I read it today, I'm like, oh, like this is enough to almost make me cry. Maybe let's try.
You got this. Just 2 out of each eyeball.
No, didn't get it. But it's close. I get this. I'm like, I think that we have to have those lines where it doesn't have to make sense, but we just know for ourselves that to cross them would be self-betrayal. And nobody has to get it. So I hear her, like, I get it. I'm with her. And I kind of just want her to say, yeah, I don't love him. And the torture to stop. And also, no. And sometimes we just can't.
Unfortunately, we know where the story's going. And I am also very glad that she does not do that.
Oh my goodness.
Might have made things easier.
Okay, but so end of this chapter, she figures out the riddle. And it's not till she's in this moment where she has to be experiencing this deep pain. And then suddenly it starts to make sense. Because she's just in that moment, she's having this clarity of like seeing all the things and seeing Amarantha's actions. And I think my favorite passage in here was, she says, for so long I had run from it, but opening myself to him, to my sisters, that had been a test of bravery as harrowing as any of my trials. Oh my gosh, did that one ever stand out to me? Yeah, because like some ways it's like, and for my story, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would much rather be like, oh my gosh, I did this, I wrote a book, or I went through this like physical therapy thing, or even like all the stuff with like my wheelchair and like being disabled. And it's like, oh gosh, like that stuff like sounds really good from the outside, but I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, in some ways I feel like getting out of my wheelchair was easy. Like it wasn't easy. It was hard, but significantly less scary than being vulnerable with people.
Yeah.
Because I could do it solo for the most part. And it only came down to me. It's like, yeah, I get what she's saying here, like opening ourselves up to people, and like they call it vulnerability for a reason, because you're actually opening yourself up to potentially be hurt. And that I love that she recognizes in this moment that was as brave as the Midgard worm. How do you say it? The
That's right.
the Midgard worm is just as brave. And then at the end, love. The answer to the riddle is love. Just in time for something to forever crack in her spine.
Perfect timing.
Shoot! It reminds me of the. Do you watch the new Beauty and the Beast, the live action ones? Oh my gosh, that was one of those movies where we got addicted to that one. I think because of the music. Where for a while, like if the girls and I wanted to watch something and we couldn't agree on something, it's like, oh, let's just rewatch that one because we all just loved singing along to the music. But it's that moment at the end where the last petal falls and then she says she loves him. It's like you are literally you were like seconds too late. Where here's like, okay, good job, you solved the riddle, and then you're okay, and you're dead. So that's not going to work very well. Come on, Feyre. Or like, okay. So in chapter 44, begin chapter 45. Did you have anything else in that last
Nope.
one? Okay.
So now we're not even in Feyre's body anymore because Feyre is dead.
She's dead.
Didn't see that one.
Didn't see that one coming, right?
But thank goodness she had that deal that she made with Rhysand so that they have the bond through which she can see through his eyes so she can still see what happens.
So she's watching this. So this time, the bargain, this one she can't back out of because the way that it was worded was if she gets it, it's instantaneous. She did get it before, technically, she was obviously had to be still alive. She talks. And so Tamlin's freed. He gets his power back and he attacks her. I'm like, what should we want to say there?
Definitely attacks her.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of what, Rhysand was hoping that this would happen just from him getting so angry, but like seeing her die.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Feyre was gonna have to die first, but he was right. Tamlin did snap and brutally kill Amarantha.
Yeah. So she's gone, but Feyre's dead. Okay. I think there's some things we could pull out here, but really what we have here is this amazing moment where each of the High Lords come forward and they are each of them putting a drop onto her. And each one quart at a time. And with, Rhysand being next to last, where we actually find an explanation of what's happening. For what she gave, we will bestow what our predecessors have granted to few before. And lets a seed of light fall on him. And then Tamlin is the last one. Now, at this point, we don't exactly know. I mean, they don't tell us in this chapter exactly what's happening, but we kind of get it. Are we allowed to say it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
You can just throw caution to the wind, Lorrie. Do something crazy.
They bring her back to life, guys.
It's true.
Which I think we realize is what's happening. So we have this moment of
because if they didn't, where the hell are we gonna go with the next 4 books?
At this point, I know I'm like,
dies.
And I think like reading it, and I think back to the people who were reading this, like whenever maybe they didn't know it was a trilogy or maybe didn't know how many books were happening.
That's true. Did it come out just one single book by itself when it came out?
I assume. I mean, like, I don't know if there's any series that doesn't do that. Now, most of the time, people say it's going to be a trilogy. But I mean, I have seen books where it's like who the main characters are changed. Like there is a chance, but it is interesting whenever you're watching a movie or reading a book, and like there's like that they're gonna make it.
Yeah.
Like
my kids will say that when we're watching the movie. Guys, nothing bad's gonna happen to him. He's one of the main characters, and I'll be like, he's one of the main characters, and really, he's not that important. So don't get too comfortable. I think this person might actually die.
whenever an author does kill off a main character, I'm like, that no. Like, I actually love the safety of knowing that like
Yes.
they're going to survive. I really struggled with the last Harry Potter for this reason. Like, we love the Harry Potter series, and I mean, you they were so. I'm like, you can't, like, whenever she killed off one of the twins, like whenever I got to that point, I was like, I just don't know. I don't know if I can handle this, because I'm like, you just can't, like, and it was one of those things where I'm like, my world is not okay right now. Like, that's not an okay thing right now, and I could not reconcile that, like, when authors actually do that. And that's the thing within there. I think there's a lot of main characters that can die, but I think we knew that she was gonna make it. Didn't know how, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know how that's gonna happen. And this whole thing of her actually dying and like this happening, did not see this coming in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so we there are weird noises outside. We don't know what they are.
I do know what it is, because I've seen my children make that noise when they are here also.
Oh my god, so we need to end this chapter. All right, so that is okay, so 45. So Amarantha goes back on her word, kills Feyre, but Feyre gets the riddle at the last point, breaks the curse. Amarantha's dead, and Feyre has now been given a drop of each of the High Lords' power, and she comes back.
Dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun. Guys, only one chapter left. Only one chapter left. Cannot wait for this last episode to wrap everything up.
And then we're gonna need a vacation.
Oh my gosh.
It's been so stressful. Thank you for joining us on this episode of A Court of Transformation and Awakening. And if you haven't already, we would just so love it if you would join us in our community on Circle. That's available at ACOTAR, ACOTA.circle.so, where you can find not only these podcasts with comments and discussions on them, but also fan chats and writers groups and just random things, and even more importantly, you can get vulnerable and do one of our deeper shared transformational journeys, where we get to dive deeper into Feyre's journey together. We'd love to see you there. We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye, friends.